My sister got a new clock, and we also so she hung it up. But we also have a big clock in the center of our room, like hanging on the wall. And I'm hearing them both tick, and it's not lining up. It's driving me insane. It's fine. Hey you guys, it's Teresa and welcome back to my channel, and today is going to be a review actually on a book that I read recently. It should be no surprise because I have talked about it, and that is Circe by Madeline Miller. So I have a lot to say about this, and I am going to try to keep this kind of spoiler free, but I'll also do the same thing that I did with my review for Daisy Jones and the Six, which is I'll have a section that's nothing but spoilers, and then I'll talk about where the spoilers end, and then we will go from there. Like, we will conclude the review. So yeah, let's just get into it. However, before I do get started in the actual review, I wanted to warn you guys that there is a trigger warning on this. There is sexual assault and a couple of graphic depictions of childbirth. I wasn't prepared for the childhood portion. I wasn't sure about the sexual assault part either. Like, I didn't expect that one. But somehow the child giving part was just like, I was eating lunch both times I read it, so I was just like, So I thought I'd warn you in case you guys are particularly squeamish. But if you guys don't know, this Circe by Madeline Miller is a retelling of the Circe myth, and it kind of follows her from her inception into kind of how she got exiled, what happened to cause the exile, and then as well as her life in this lonely island that involves running into these heroes that are well known in the Odyssey and the rest of Greek mythology, as well as her own niece, who is perpetually well known for killing off her own children. So yeah, that's all I can really say without giving out too much about it, because like I said, the Circe myth is something else that I don't really know a ton about. As for first thoughts, like I said, I didn't know a lot about the Circe mythology going in. I read about her clearly because I did study Greek myths back in the day, so I knew about her from the Odyssey, from I believe Jason and the Argonauts, and that was just about as much as the myth as I had known. I didn't know kind of her background and what had happened after those said myths. I did do some research on her before I picked up this book, just so I had an idea in my head, and they all of them related back to Odysseus, and that was just kind of it, which was kind of really underwhelming, primarily because just by reading the synopsis you can tell that she's this great powerful figure in Greek mythology, but all the tellings that I have found online only relate her back to men, and I was just kind of annoyed with it because I felt like she would be one of the well-known feminist, not feminist, but she would be one of those figures in mythology that serves kind of a more feminist theme, if that makes sense. But I was still excited to pick it up either way. When I bought it, I decided to wait a bit before I read it. You know, I don't know, I bought it somewhere between February and March, so I definitely did wait a month at most, probably a week at minimum before I read this, but I still wanted to go ahead and read it. And look at like how the edges are cut. I'm always torn between like these like uneven edges because I like the aesthetic. It proves like some weird like antique kind of vibe. At the same time, I'm like, but why? Because then like they don't like age the same, I guess is the best way I can put it, but what are you gonna do about it? As for things I did like, one of the biggest things that I enjoyed was that it really showed that a lot of the Greek heroes that we read about only did things out of a sense of pride. They wanted to become, whether or not they admitted it to themselves, they wanted to be this hero, this figure in mythology that got all the attention and all the pizzazz, and we don't see that a lot in a lot of retellings. We didn't see that in the Song of Achilles. So to have her be this outside perspective that's like, yeah, a lot of these heroes are only really doing it so they can get their name in big lights. There's no, I want to save the world, there's no noble aspect of it. They all seem fairly selfish beings. As usual, I thought that Madeline Miller's writing was poetic. It brought out a sense of, you can feel a lot of Circe's emotions throughout this novel. You see a lot of the things that she is feeling, and she finds a way to explain it and make you feel these things without really shoving it in your face. You never feel like you are being forced to feel these things. These feelings come up naturally, they bubble up in you, and you get to see them expressed throughout Circe's life, and I really enjoy that. I also love how Madeline Miller has this way of creating characters. They're all so flawed. Like, even the main character, she is fantastically flawed, as well as the side characters, and even like, you can see that. And I love that even though they are these such flawed characters, they are still so three-dimensional they're not built off their flaws, and somehow you love them despite these flaws that you are presented with. And it's just, I want to write characters like Madeline Miller, like please and thank you. It honestly feels like you're with the characters as you read through. You feel like you are sitting with Circe and Odysseus as they chat about their lives. You are there with Circe as she goes through this very lonely kind of childhood. And it's never like you're being told a story, even though in a lot of cases you are. This is Circe telling you her version of the events, her life, and still somehow it still feels very natural. It doesn't feel like you are being told, like, it doesn't feel like you're sitting in front of a fire and she's reiterating it with you. It feels like you're literally sitting down there with her, which is weird because she's not fictional. She's not historical. She is fictional. But somehow she feels like a very real person with very real troubles. And like I said, what is one of my favorite things about Madeline Miller's writing. Can you please come out with the third book, and can it be Medusa, pretty please? I thought that Circe's mind and this kind of like subtle internal war that she has with herself, where she doesn't know if she wants to belong with the immortals or if she wants to be with the humans that she is and wants to help them, was so wonderful. I thought it was like, you couldn't really tell it at first, but like you can see there were waves of the waves. There were beads of it weaved throughout the rest of the novel, where you see that she empathizes more with humans as they have accepted her despite her Titan nature, goddess nature. Yeah, one of those two. But somehow she is still this immortal being that can never be with them, can never really enjoy their lives together. So she is torn between distancing herself from these humans and no longer feeling these things, but also falling in love with them and everything that they do that makes them human. I thought that it was such a wonderful internal war, and seeing her progress to where she did it felt soothing in a way, because we see her struggle with it very subtly. It's a very human struggle. It's not very dramatic or cataclysmic. It's very like subtle. There are bits of waves in there pushing against the rock until the rock eventually falls away. And I thought that it was a very satisfying ending to her overall struggle. Although on top of that, her character progression is also very subtle, because she is this immortal being. We see a lot of time jumps throughout the entirety of the book, for the most part, trying to see, like, kind of emphasizing that she is this immortal being, and time doesn't really flow the same way that it does for her as it is for us. Like, there we see 16 years go by, but it really happened within the time of a page, which I thought was really telling of how, like, immortals view this idea of, like, living, and how the years just kind of go through them, like, super quickly. I also enjoyed Daedalus and Telemachus. I thought that while both characters were wonderfully different and provided something different to the table, their parallels of both being these gentle human beings who didn't want this and just wanted to be happy was such a wonderful thing, and a wonderful compliment to Circe's kind of overall internal journey, I guess is the best way of putting it. Honestly, I knew it was going to happen in certain parts of the book, because we go through Daedalus's myth, we go through Jason the Argonaut's myth, we go through Odysseus's myth, as she is kind of interwoven with these myths due to her family, her own physical, like, presence, or however you may put it. But I was still really heartbroken by the events that had occurred throughout this novel, even though, like, I knew, like, I sat there and was like, yeah, I shouldn't get attached to you because you're gonna fall from the sky and die. But here I am, hoping you get married to Circe and have children. Really, like, honestly, Madeline Miller's writing just does it for me, where I know what's gonna happen, I can feel it in the back of my mind, but I still get lost and I still get attached, and oh my goodness. Now, as for things I did not like, I felt like that in a lot of times Circe was kind of this observer in her own life. She didn't really do a lot of things actively. She had her small moments, like helping Prometheus, helping Daedalus, all that kind of stuff, but she was never a very active participant in her life. She let everything kind of happen to her, which I guess is part of her characterization, but even toward the end, a lot of the things just kind of happened to her, and she took it as they came along, and there wasn't a lot of pushback on it until, like, the very end. But even then, it wasn't a huge pushback. She kind of got what she wanted, slight spoiler there. So I would have liked to have seen Circe been more active in what she was doing, because it felt like a lot of the things that she was doing was very passive, and it was, like, weird, because in a lot of the mythology she is seen as this very powerful being who defied the gods and did all these things. But then you see her be really passive in this novel, and it was very, not jarring, but it was a different image of what I had pictured for Circe, if that makes sense. So I would have really liked to see that instead. I also would have liked, while I did enjoy her progression in her internal war between being immortal and being immortal and wanting to be with the mortals, I would have liked to have seen that little internal struggle there be a little more dramatized, I guess, or expanded on. Because like even from the very beginning, you knew what her decision was going to be at the end. You knew that even though she is struggling with this, you knew where she lied on, where on the spectrum of mortal and immortal, and mortal and immortal that she wanted to be on. And I would have liked to have seen that struggle be a little more defined, I suppose is the best way I can put it. Alright, time for the spoilery part, and like with my Daisy Jones and the Six review, I will be leaving a timestamp on the screen about where, like, me wrapping up this thing, but there's not a lot of spoilers, so really it's probably going to be like not even that long. Honestly, I'm very glad they, like in the original myth, or one of the retellings of the myth, Telemachus and Penelope come after Odysseus is dead, and eventually Telemachus marries Circe, and Penelope marries Telegonus, who is Odysseus' son through Circe. And I'm really, really glad they didn't do anything with Telegonus and Penelope, I'm not gonna lie. I sat there and was like, because they were like, she was hinting at it. You can feel it in your bones that she was like, yeah, they're gonna be together. And I'm like, no, she's like 50 and he's like 16. Let's nod and say we did. But I really thought she didn't go that route. I thought that what she had for Telegonus was very fitting for his personality. It worked with him wanting to see the world and wanting to be this like, not a conqueror, but like seen in his own right as he was hidden away for like most of his life. I also enjoyed the fact that Penelope became a witch and like she essentially came into her own, like, because she's a very manipulative woman in the best way possible. She does things to protect her family, to protect herself. So I thought that her becoming a witch also worked really well. Also, since like Telegonus went off with Athena, since that was the thing in the book, what the hell happened to him at the end? Because I feel like Circe makes her decision to become mortal with Telemachus and like have children and everything, but like she went on this huge quest to try and save him, like hid him away for 16 years, put a shield around the entire island so no one can get to him, and like threw a big fit about him leaving, and then all of a sudden she was just like, yeah, that he's gone. It's like, the Telegonus never right? Did you guys never try to keep in touch, try to visit? Like, your banishment is gone, you're now mortal. So like, what happened there? I don't know if I missed it or something, or if I need to go and reread the actual myth and see what other retellings or versions of that had happened. I also thought the ending was so fitting, like her ending up with Telemachus and like them falling in love and having children. I thought that it was a very fitting ending considering all these things that she had gone through, that she wanted children, she wanted a big family, she wanted to die with her loved one, and that was just really, 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 really nice. I still just wish that the struggle was a little bigger, because like the entire time I was reading, I was like, she's gonna choose the world. Like, you introduced us to Prometheus, who chose banishment and eternal suffering because he wanted to help mortals, and you drew that connection with Circe and like Prometheus early on. So we knew it was going to happen, but it was just like, I would have liked to have seen more of that struggle, because we all know that Prometheus went through that struggle at some point, and it wasn't as clear cut, but it is what it is. So if you're back here, welcome back. No crying this time, but again, spoilers were a little shorter because I feel like I don't have a lot to say, because this book is just a lot of mythology chunked into one, and if I were to talk about everything that broke my heart in this book, it probably would, there'd be no point in the rest of the review, because it would just all that. But yeah, so for my overall rating, I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. I don't think this displaces the Song of Achilles for me, but I definitely did still enjoy it as like one of my favorite books of all time. Definitely top 5 or 10, depends on my mood. Highly would recommend it. It has a place in my heart. I think that Circe's mythology and kind of like her coming into herself and her struggling with her identity is something that like isn't shown a lot in Greek mythology retelling, so this was very enjoyable to see, and I highly, highly recommend. But that is it for my review on Circe. There wasn't a lot to talk about, but I feel like I had a lot to talk about. But if you guys want to hear more of my thoughts on it, feel free to talk to me kind of in the comments or find me on social media. My links will be in the description down below. If you guys have any books you want me to review that you have seen that I have read, Goodreads is also a wonderful aspect for you guys to find that in. But until my next video, I'll talk to you guys everywhere else, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye!